Hi, and welcome to part two of our conversation with Jon Lorenzini from LiftLab. For more episodes, check out Bonsai's podcast, Branching Out. We'll dive into the topics Jon and I talk about in the second half. Stay tuned and enjoy part two.
One question I want to ask you though, because so
Mhm.
you lead the thinking right at LiftLab, and you've been a leader in this space for a long time. You know, you left Google. You've been doing this, as we both know. This is it might be and it might be intellectually stimulating this industry we're in. It's certainly not easy. So I
Mhm.
know why kind of I'm doing it, but I'd love, John, why are you doing this? Right? Like, tell me a little about like what motivates you to succeed so well at what you're doing today.
Sure. So I think the big thing after leaving Google, I went to Meta, and then after leaving Meta, I went to Snap. And Google had a level of Kool-Aid and flavor. And what I learned from drinking and undrinking the Kool-Aid from Google to Meta was a lot of the ideology and the ways to think about measurement directly reflect the product's inherent benefits.
Yep.
And because of that, you realize that what might be pushed on you ideologically is advantageous to the platform to make money off of you. Like, for instance, lifetime value. I think lifetime value is important. It should be part of your measurement, but it also justifies much higher acquisition costs. And that makes the publishers more money, you know?
It was weaponized. It was weaponized.
Yes, and that's exactly it, is the positioning of it and the thought behind it is pure and true, but the application of it could be used in such a way that makes them more money, and that financial incentives are the reason why, you know, and if they have to grow 20% quarter over quarter or year over year, that becomes a conflict of interest of why you're choosing what you're choosing. And I think that the drinking and undrinking of the Kool-Aid through those different lenses of very smart people made me kind of arrive at my own value opinion. And I think this is something where I'm stubborn and I'm an analyst and I'm very annoying. That's why I have a meetup group so that we can hang out with other annoying people who are stubborn and annoying. And I think,
Plug the group, by the way. Plug the group, because
it's
I
called
think people
Beers and
should
Data.
know.
If you're in New York, first Tuesday of the month, it's at Mustang Harry's from 6 to 9. We do it every month. I've been doing it. Next month will be a decade. I have 16,000 members and around 40 show up per. So it's a fun group. If you have a spreadsheet you want to share, we actually want to see it, unlike your other friends. So come by and check it out. But yeah, that's something that I think you have an opinion and your opinion is against what is common. And I think that proving the opinion or trying out ideas in a way that shifts the market is something of a really expensive, really long-term and high effort way of saying, you know, I think this is the way we should do things. So is it driven partially by ego? Maybe. Is it also driven by the wanting to do right by your clients? Definitely. And then is it something where creating something out of nothing has some creativity in an otherwise mundane kind of thing of data drudgery? So I think that that combination of things, while looking at customer behavior, human behavior, has creative, has distribution, economics, you know, all those things in one make this an insanely difficult problem to solve. And I don't think there is a silver bullet. I don't think there is a solve. There's only getting closer to, you know, the fog of what is the truth. You kind of get a little bit further into the fog and can map that out. But I think that that fundamentally is the edge of what makes a company succeed or fail. If you're DTC, if you're, you know, B2B, is the way to sway hearts and minds at scale. And I think
If someone,
yeah,
sorry, you're just getting me fired up, John. I love this. Like, if you're somebody who, let's say, they can't work with you, or they can't talk to you, or they can't meet you up for New York, or they can't bring LiftLab on today, or they don't know me, and don't have time to chat or whatever, but like they've got the problems that we help solve. Let's say they're staring ROAS down in the face, but we know like what's really going on there. Like, if you had to like pick the thing, like what's the one thing that you see the most in need of addressing when faced with that challenge? What would you do to help somebody who's facing the ROAS problem? And what's your advice?
Yeah, I would say the phrase, the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed, comes to mind.
Mhm.
And what we want
Mhm.
to do is be able to shift and like update it and upgrade our clients. And I think the thing that they come in most is an over reliance on touches or things that they feel is tangible, right? Touches occur in terms of seeing an impression, making a click, doing something like that. And then they have to be mapped to identity. That gets broken, especially with all the identity concerns. So when you see ROAS, what ROAS tells you, that's revenue divided by ad spend. What that tells you is more of how qualified is your audience. It does not answer the question of whether or not ads work. Even incremental revenue on ad spend, iROAS, tells you how your average dollar over the average audience works. It doesn't tell you what this last dollar did, or, you know, marketers make decisions not do I spend $0 or $1 million on Google. It's do I spend 900K or 1.1 million on Google. And that's where marginal comes into play. So marginal ROAS to me is my North Star, because that's where optimization and business decisions for marketers need to be made. iROAS is phenomenal for finance because I spent this, I got this, I put it in the spreadsheet, good to go. But making decisions, you really need that marginal piece. And I have a couple analogies of why I think ROAS is an underperforming metric. One was actually from Kevin Hartman. It's like going to a bar and blaming the last shot for getting you drunk, you know, and that's kind of what a last click touch base kind of thing is. It disproportionately favors the last piece as opposed to the sum total of all the touches that you had that convince you to purchase. The other thing is, if let's say I were giving out coupons and I wanted for a pizza place, you know, let's say Lorenzini's Pizza Place, I could give out the coupons as someone's walking in the door. That hurts my average order value, and they were walking in the door anyways. Why would I give them a coupon? Or I could give it across town and I get a lower response rate because you'd have to drive across town to get the pizza, but the coupon convinced them to drive across town as opposed to the people that were already walking through the door. And this was on the Correspondent when that publication existed. But really it's ROAS just tells you how qualified, how close to the front door of your pizza spot are you? It doesn't tell you the things that you need to know, which is, are ads working, which is iROAS, and at what level should I be spending, which is mROAS. And it's just so unfortunate that the leaning on that makes people have a false sense of they're optimizing towards the right thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, we talk a lot about how, I think people in our world know too much, and we know how like less trackable things are, like in the bigger perspective. But we bury them. I believe we confuse ourselves because we miss the fact that things are more trackable than ever. And trackability, think about everything that's ever happened in digital ad measurement. It's this pursuit of additional, you mentioned like touch points. It's the injection of being able to like make it more measurable from some sort of activity perspective. And it's like one of the things I do now is I try to help people. Like, we don't talk about the math yet, but like I try to explain to people and help them understand that essentially, like, if you do anything online and you ever get a customer from it, you should know it's almost impossible for that customer to not show up in every single platform's conversion data in their ROAS. And they're like, well, but I wasn't running an ad at that time, or whatever. It's like, I don't think you guys understand how pervasive the tracking is and how many ways you may or may not even be aware, right? And you know, that's like it's super scary for people who haven't really once you understand how incredibly pervasive it is.
If you look at a remarketing campaign, the frequency that you see on platform by platform is by platform. It's not overlapping. And when someone goes to that site, all the pixels fire. And then guess what? You got 20 impressions on Google, 20 impressions on Facebook, 10 impressions on Snapchat. So what we found when you go to smaller platforms, remarketing on smaller platforms is a little redundant with the big guys. Now, in terms of should you do the small guy because they have, lower CPMs? Maybe, right? And that becomes an auction versus efficacy. We have a two-stage model that splits those two things out so that if the auction changes, that doesn't change the response model. It's pretty cool. Check out LiftLab. We're an awesome product. cheap plug. But the bigger thing, I think, with the overlapping reach is when you cut one leg out from a 20-legged stool, that stool will still stand. And you're not going to see these dramatic results. And when I hear people that are on like 15 platforms go, I'm going to go dark in one of these 20 platforms or 15 platforms. Good. Like you're not going to, your sales are not going to plummet to zero. And if you do, that means that's a really important channel. And you could probably cut the other 14 because they're not propping up your sales. And this fear of testing because they're going to lose something, sure, it's real. There's opportunity costs. You got to pay for your learnings. If you don't pay, you don't learn. And that's just how it works. And it's compounding interest over once you learn something over indefinite. And if you have testing culture, the margins you make on the tests allow you to open up more tests. If I save money on Google branded search, I could redeploy that on Facebook prospecting. And that's compounding interest that you could do from a state of abundance. When a company is failing and they're like, we need to change things, but we don't want to test, we don't want to incur costs, that's when you're in trouble. And that's when it's almost, you have to say, look, you guys are in a tailspin because of the mindset. You got to get into a testing mindset, and you have to test things that are important, and you have to be able to take those risks to learn. And I think that the multi-platform conversation, what I learned on smaller platforms is what is unique to the platform. For instance, on Snapchat, you have swipe ups. Facebook doesn't have swipe ups on Snapchat. Google doesn't have swipe ups on that. That could be a new audience for you to target that's displayed some sort of interest or action that's unique to that platform. So if you're really trying to drive incrementality, if you're doing impression-based, you're going to get garbage inventory. So put guardrails on that and filters and prevent that. If you're doing remarketing, you're going to get high frequency against a relevant audience. It's going to pump your ROAS stats, but it's not going to pump your incrementality stats. And then you have those on-platform actions, which are not directly related to outcomes, but it is related to interest that only that platform has, which could give you new people and new people who might be interested in your product. And that's kind of where the incrementality comes from.
A lot of great nuggets here. People are probably thinking, what is Matt doing? He's bringing this smart guy from a competitor and he's making all these amazing points. Well, I mean, I got news for you, right? Like, there's a reason. Like, by the way, love the two model, the kind of conversion and auction like components you guys do. Mm-hmm. By the way, guys, who do you think invented all that? We worked on all these things together. Like, we were all like in this, right? Like,
this predates me. I can't take credit for this. This predates me, but it was something that is like.
What I would say is, I think I just know that it comes from a corpus of folks who know how to think about this. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a reason why it works. There's a reason why when we do our monthly forecasting on top of what we do on Overstory, that keeps showing up like if you do it, it ends up in the range. If it did it, if we didn't know what we were talking about, we wouldn't be able to just keep like identifying opportunities, predicting what'll probably happen, putting it in motion, and then watching it happen, right? Like, so, I think I love it.
I think there is a convergence on like certain methodologies, but again, no absolutes there. But I do think there is overhyping of daylight between competitors that might not be true. And this is something like, oh, do they do this? Because we do this. And then we go, no, we don't do this, but why? And I don't want to like come from a defensive position of like, we don't do this and it's bad. It's like, we can do this and we do this, but we choose not to for these reasons. That comes from a place of strength. Yeah. But then what you end up doing is building all these features that are driven by sales as opposed to driving customer value. And this is something that companies can very much get in. And the informed buyer versus non-informed buyer is night and day in the sales process. They have the checklist of like, here's the features. Do you have feature parity? And it's like, yes, but on a sliding scale. And some do this robustly. Some do this, with some duct tape and WD-40, and that I think informed buyers understand by asking a lot of questions in a way that it's like, bring your nerd, make sure they grill the other nerds, lock horns, see if you respect each other's methodology. And then there's the trust to operationalize it. If you have someone coming in and saying, this is it, and whatnot, you're using the same data. And bad data is bad data. And marketing data is primarily bad data. If you look at inputs, if you cap out your budget and go straight every single day, can you correlate off a straight line? The answer is no. There is no methodology that unstraightens a straight line. That's why we think it's extremely important to create better data through testing, create variance, and create counterfactuals. Those are good, strong data points that allow you to calibrate. And if you're not doing those kind of things, that to me is like saying, yeah, we don't know what the data is telling us, but we're going to make our opinion and sell it to you as if it's more accurate or better. And I'm taking the opinion, I don't think our methodology is worlds better than anyone else. I think our process of getting better data and the way we design experiments is kind of the competitive differentiation.
Sorry, there were some birds above me started to chirp as we talked just now there, John. I think you got them all riled up.
No,
yeah. I mean,
no don't call me that, Butler. I don't need another competitor.
I'm like the Falcons are coming for us.
Yep.
You know, no. Anyway, yeah. No, man, I agree on every front, and I guess, and you're right about like the back to like sales cycles for our world, the informed buyer versus non-informed buyer. I'll tell you, like, I'm not even sure. Like, I don't know if anyone in the space like does this. Like, the consultant in me wants to like. When I talk to the really informed buyer, it's great. We should all probably be going back to those informed buyers and almost having like a checklist for them. Be like, hey, you're really informed. You know what you want, but you better freaking have control. You better affect what changes. Because like, let's ask like, does the CFO like approve everything you do? Does your team know how to execute? Like all these.
Yep.
Because like, there's nothing more dangerous than an informed buyer knows what they want and has no organizational control over the change. And they get the best tool. Yeah, exactly. And then you're frustrated. And then you're like, then you're holding up the work on the work's merit. And that's got to be so unfulfilling.
That's your IP. You know that by grinding it out on Sears, you know how decisions get made. And that is part of the IP that works in your product of how do you get buy-in before you start doing all this work? And I think and
that's hard.
It's harder than the product itself. Moving data around a spreadsheet is easy. Convincing people who are set in their ways is hard. And that is so undervalued in measurement tech companies because they're so reliant on data. It's like the data can only take you so far. You have to make decisions. You have to have buy-in. You have to point out strengths and weaknesses and work collaboratively so you get to a place where you both feel comfortable. And that's hard.
It's like one way you could think about it, right? Like if you're looking at anyone in the space, like, we're all going to say we have a bunch of, real impacts. And one thing that will definitely be true, right? If you're a great measurement platform, service, team, whatever, your ROI for organizations is real if you or your product is a great organizational, institutional, essentially like collaboration tool.
Yep.
It has to be. It has to be, because if it isn't, the ROI is fake. Yep. It's surface level, or it addresses, we used to do this one thing and then I got, we proved that it works and I got approval to do the social thing next month and that's wonderful. Those aren't nothing. Like those are good wins, but like we both know that if you're just throwing, little part, semi-important, knife fights in what is like an honestly like a much bigger battle, you run the risk of like being in the same place you would have had if you weren't even, that's the tragedy of like last click and ROAS, right? It's like so many other things have to go right for it to be like, screw it. I guess this report is so preposterously wrong, but because so many other things weren't in place to make a real difference, I don't even know if it matters if we move off this thing. And that's like I would say like these still like current exciting problem to work on, but also the tragedy of the situation. There's real arguments to be made in a lot of places to say you have like something that's like essentially led your strategy astray for a long time, but it's still potentially not worth fixing yet until you can fix the institutional willingness and safety to acknowledge it. Hey, maybe this isn't working. Maybe there's another way. And then, you bring the smart guys like John in. And then honestly, it's great. It's always better than you think. But like I think those are the things that I'm excited to see, in the next few years. I obviously hope we're doing that work. I know you guys will be doing that work, and I know there'll be others doing great work as well. So yeah, I don't know, man. This has been super awesome. I guess
just one note on that,
yeah,
and then we could close out. Sorry, I just want to make one
no,
point, which is like the vintage in which a company like goes through explosive growth tends to be this worked for us now, this will work for us always. And if you had explosive growth under the last click phase, you stay on last click. If you did it on the incremental, you stay on incremental. If you did it on the marginal, you stay on marginal, because smaller companies that explode have more junior people that are closer to what's new. And they do what's new, it works, it allows them to explode, but then they stick to that. And evolving your methodology is exactly the problem. And the vintage of when you grow is the vintage of what you stay. And that's the real challenge here.
I was there, right? Like you mentioned, we were there 2013, right? I was an old, I got gray hair. I was in the room.
I don't see gray hair. You look good. Where?
It's more in here.
Okay. Little salt and pepper.
Little salt and pepper. But I was there, right? Not just to be an analytics lead at Google for of the first vintage, but I worked with lots of companies that was their first ever online advertising.
Mm-hmm.
Like, honestly, there was a period, it was probably more the case than it was the exception. And, you go into different verticals, and this is true in a lot of places. And think about that for a second compared to where we are today. Like, yeah, in that kind of world where there's, effectively like an undersold, uncompetitive digital market, coming to it for the first time, you're starting to run some ads. And now we're tracking it with like a pixel that is like really works very well and tracks a lot of data. You know what? That situation, honestly, it kind of was fine. That data at that time was largely incremental business. And there might have been any good thinking behind it, like from a data science perspective. Yep. But it just so happened that in that situation, that actually works, right? Mm-hmm. But nothing has changed, right? Like there's nothing nefarious has happened from a technological perspective in 12 years, but the context has changed entirely. And the exact same stuff means nothing now.
Yep. No one beats the market consistently with the same strategy. The market changes around your strategy.
Yeah.
Because if it's working, other people do it and exploit it, and then it no longer becomes an advantage.
And it's the context through which all this data is collected that matters. And the reason why you have to evolve. It's not because of some, like, trust me, I wish, we all wish there was like a boogeyman that was a real thing out there, like rubbing their hands together, like responsible for all of these issues. But like, this is simply like, it's just not the case. This is an industry that's evolved a lot. This is what it means now. And like, yes, if you decide to take the leap and evolve, you'll be blown away by how you can regain the days of like that incredible growth that digital first drove, as opposed to like what essentially is this. Yeah, I mean, it's just like super, challenging battle that most companies find themselves living today. Well, I apologize. I did not mean to shoot you out the door, John. It's been a pleasure. I'm the one that's got to run. I've got my my list of things to catch up on. And you're on the fourth day of a conference, guys. By the way, like recommendation. I would not, don't book yourself for too many podcasts. You'll, end up running on fumes by the end of it. So, but anyway, thank you for carrying it. And it's so great to see you again. And I know we'll talk. I don't think I'll be at the next New York data meetup in person, but I always want to get pictures, and I will always be letting you know when I am in town. Hopefully, when you guys are throwing little spreadsheets and beers together. This is also, by the way, for those listening to this long, God bless you. This is probably the longest I've ever talked to you without us breaking into some sort of song at a karaoke bar. So kudos to us.
We both have maybe not good opinions. That's for everyone else to decide. We have strong opinions.
Strong opinions, and we're actually not that bad of a hang either, despite what you hear. So thank you guys. Thank you, John.